Perfect. Okay, so I think we'll get started with the event, and then people can be coming in one by one. So welcome everybody. And please do put your name and where you're from in the chat. But welcome everyone to this event hosted by Women in Dev. The event is Suffering in Silence: The Gender-Based Violence You Don't Hear About. So my name is Lauren Foley. I'll be your moderator for today. So just a little bit about me before we get started. I am a digital communications consultant with Global Office Consulting, raging feminist. So just really happy to be here and learning from these incredible people. I am a feminist YouTuber and writer, and host talks and workshops kind of like this. So I'm just super excited to be here, and thank you all for joining us. Basically, today's event is just how we can accelerate global progress to eliminate gender-based violence. And we'll be particularly focusing on types of violence that are not usually talked about, or that maybe go unnoticed or are misunderstood or simply aren't prioritized when compared with other forms of gender-based violence. So I'm really excited to hear some of the things and learn, and I hope you all kind of take something home today. So for those of you who don't know already, we are Women in Dev, and Women in Dev is basically a platform to connect and unite women working at all levels and across all regions in the international development space, global health space, and social justice sectors. And basically what we just kind of aim to do is provide a safe space for women to come together as leaders, advocates, allies, and we just, share resources and knowledge, and just have honest, solutions-focused dialogue around barriers to, progressing in gender equality, but also opportunities to how we can progress in gender equality. So that's who we are. I'm so excited that we're still having people come in and come in. So I'm really excited to have you here. As I said, would love for anybody to put their name and maybe where they're dialing in from in the chat, just so we have a sense of who's here. And also, I would love, for just to have a sense of who we have here. Just with housekeeping, the event is an hour long. And then if everybody could just make sure that they're muted or that there's no sound coming on so that we can hear our speakers perfectly. So without further ado, I will give a chance for each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we can get kicked off with the questions. So I think we'll start there with Nina. If you want to just give an idea of who you are and what area of gender-based violence that you're working on.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Nina Aouilk. I'm an activist speaking out against honour killings and human trafficking and child brides. The reason that I'm so passionate about this particular subject is because I was a child bride. I survived an honour killing by literally crawling out on my hands and feet and escaping a near death. And had I not done that, I would have been sent to India and been killed there. I also support and advocate against human trafficking, spreading awareness, because my sister was trafficked by our father at the age of 6. So naturally, that's something very close to my heart. And although I live in hope that I can bring her home one day, I know there are other girls out there waiting for someone just to try to give them some hope. So that's in a nutshell who I am and what I'm about. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I feel actually quite privileged just to be just to hear from you today. So thank you very much for being here, and I'm excited to hear what else you have to say. Janet, if you'd like to introduce yourself next, and what area of gender-based violence that you work on, or what areas you work on.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Janet Mbugua. I'm based in Kenya. I'm a media person, founder of Inua Dada Foundation, and we initially had a huge focus on menstrual inequity, which we still do, but that's broadened a little bit to SRH and GBV on a pretty broad spectrum, because especially with the onset of COVID, it's had a multiplying effect, whether it's emotional, financial, physical, sexual. And so we're providing a lot of psychosocial support to survivors in communities we work with. And really honored to be among all of you. Nina, I think that's an incredibly moving account, and it's great to share a space with all these incredible sisters here. And I think I'll continue to say more as we go along, but for now, I'm really happy to be here and to participate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet. And I completely agree. I think it's nice that you mentioned COVID as well in your opening, just because it's obviously had such an impact on this topic. So I think that'll probably come up again as we speak. Doreen, if you'd like to go next, say a bit about who you are.
Right. Thanks, Lauren. Yes, so my name is Doreen Gaura and my pronouns are she and they. I'm a program officer at Detention International South Africa, which is a health and human rights organization that works to address sexual abuse in all places of detention. I mostly do training with correctional officers and other stakeholders on addressing sexual abuse behind bars. And I also coordinate the Detention Justice Forum, which is a national civil society network that seeks to uphold detainee rights. I also coordinate the organizational advocacy and policy reform processes, as well as our work within the Southern African region. I'm very honored to be here and to be amongst such amazing people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doreen. And yeah, super excited to hear about this area, because again, I just think it's one of those that just not talked about enough. So thank you so much. And Yvonne, yeah, would love to hear from you and what you're working on.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Yvonne Chi Leina. I am a journalist and advocate for women's rights, the founder of Women Relief Services, formerly known as Gender Danger, and I'm on the board of WallPulse. I'm no longer the Africa lead, I'm a board member. And my campaigns, my digital campaigns, my loudest voice goes to end the practice of breast ironing, which affects 1 in 4 girls in Cameroon, and surprisingly happens in almost every part of the world. I'm looking forward to learning from you all and sharing deeper thoughts how we go about to achieve gender equality and eradicate all of these practices. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And again, yeah, I just think we have just a brilliant lineup of people talking about such different areas. So I'm just super excited. So yeah, let's get into the questions. So I think, yeah, again, this is one for all of you to begin with. In your words, what exactly is gender-based violence? What could it include? And I guess, what does it mean for in your particular context and in the community you advocate for? So we'll start with Doreen.
Oh, great. So for me and for the organization I'm representing, just Detention International South Africa, our definition or understanding of what gender-based violence is and could include is essentially aligned with that of the UN Interagency Standing Committee GBV guidelines, as well as South Africa's National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence definition, which is a broad and inclusive one that also acknowledges that men and boys and LGBTQI+ persons and other vulnerable groups do fall under or can be vulnerable and victims of gender-based violence. South African legislation and civil society policies are relatively broad and inclusive in their definition, but this is mostly in theory, not so much in practice. And we see this a lot in the programming and, priority agenda setting processes and mainstream advocacy, legislative and policy reforms. And so, the reason that the broad definition is something that we align with ourselves is because we acknowledge that sexual violence in places of detention, particularly prisons, is extremely gendered, regardless of whether it's in an all-male facility or an all-female facility. The nature of the violence itself is a gendered violence, and also precisely because how it unfolds, whether it's in a men's prison or a women's prison, is basically as an extension of the misogyny, rape culture, and queerphobia that we see in broader society. And that's why we feel that gender-based violence is something that is very that our work to address sexual abuse in places of detention is very much an integral part of the broader fight to fight gender-based violence in our society.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, and I think that point is a really interesting one, that even if it's, say, just men, that it's still gendered, there still is that dimension to it. So again, I'm excited to hear kind of more about that as we go through. I think it's really, yeah, just something that's not really thought about or framed that often. So thank you. Nina, next to you.
So predominantly, I am fighting for justice, hoping to change laws and people's minds really about this whole very centuries old pandemic, as I call it, that regards women and girls as being of a lower value to men. When I was younger and I was growing up, my mum's friends were having baby girls and they were being placed into plastic bags, being suffocated and buried in the garden, and the births were never registered, because that's the value of a girl in their eyes. And it hasn't really changed 20, 30 years later. It's not changed. I'm now 52, I keep forgetting, 52, and things are still the same. We are still facing a cultural crimes that don't allow girls to have the same opportunities as the boys, and it's mainly to do with honor. A lot of this is to do with how the parents see themselves being taken in a public eye, and the highest form of honor is to kill that person, that child, which is hard to understand when you have mindsets like ours. So I'm really fighting for the new generation to understand that without baby girls we don't have a future. There is no future without baby girls, and that, you know, girls can be everything that a boy can be. And I've tried all my life to prove that I was as good as a boy when I realized I didn't need to prove anything. But that's really what I'm fighting about, the whole child bride situation. I'm a part of an organization in Zimbabwe actually called End Child Marriages. And the lady there, she stops people putting their girls into marriages because she puts them into school. So that's where I'm mainly focused, if I'm being honest, because you can focus in 20 different places. So the problem being that you won't get those 20 things done. So my main focus is the honor killings, child trafficking, as I said, and trying to also educate girls if they are being forced out of the country to be killed or trafficked, what they can actually do about it.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, I think I love what you said at the beginning, centuries old pandemic, because it's just, I think we need to view it as such, because it really is. And yeah, just girls being the future. I think that's something that people just don't really think about when they're discriminating against them. So thank you so much for that. And I think, yeah, I just appreciate all the work that you're doing in this space. It's, yeah, amazing. Then Yvonne, same question to you, maybe just kind of what exactly is gender-based violence from your perspective, and kind of what does that mean for your context or your community?
In my context, I would like us to take a journey to Cameroon, or West Africa, West and Central Africa, where women are considered property. So in order to get married, I have to be sold to my husband's family out in blatant terms. They call that the bride price. That one is diminishing my value as a human being. And so it is that act of considering me property that my family would want to place value on me by making sure that I fall in the brackets that they have chosen to be what a valuable property is, by ironing my breasts, for example, so that I am not sexually active at an early age. I got to know about breast ironing when I caught my grandmother doing it on my cousin. The rationale behind breast ironing is in order to prevent rape. The practice is done to suppress the growth of a girl child. And the growth of a boy child is not suppressed. That's gender-based violence to me, because if there was some equality, then we would have had penis ironing. But because there's no penis ironing, that's where the context of gender-based violence and breast ironing falls on this platform. And I would like to say that this practice is deeply enshrined in almost every part of the world, just done in a different way. In North America, develop breast early, are given breast bands to wear by their moms. It's not an object, but the mere idea of trying to flatten the breast using the most modern gadget whatsoever it is called breast ironing. And so I would just summarize to say that breast ironing is gender-based violence, because ironing doesn't happen.
I think that's such a good point. And I think like, just, I would love to stress the issue of like, yeah, it is all over the world. And like that, like so often that like an issue that things that are done to women are meant to be the ones to try and fight that again, as opposed to the ones who are actually perpetrating it. So, and that shows up in myriad different forms all over the world when women and girls have to take responsibility for things that are done to them. So thank you for sharing that. And then finally, Janet, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's just incredibly heart-wrenching to think about these practices still happening. And so gender-based violence it's a lot of what my peers have said. It's diminishing a woman and a girl beyond what her abilities are. And it's something that we focus on as well. So yes, you have domestic violence and rape, teen pregnancy, And this might go in a little bit into the discussion, but there's almost ways that it's evolved, quote unquote, because one aspect that we look at is sex for water, which is something that we did a report on last week. So now you have a group of women and girls whose rights are diminished to the point where accessing a basic right like water, you trade yourself. And in a lot of the cases, it's violent. A lot of the time, it's very young girls. And that's just dealing with generational trauma, because it's been happening. I think the first case was probably heard about in 2015 from the studies we did with an organization called Kewasnit. So gender-based violence is taking on different forms that really speak to diminishing the ability of a woman or a girl. And yes, boys and men are affected. It's critical that we recognize that, but it's also critical that we understand that just based on the setup of our societies, and if I can speak for Kenya and the patriarchy, you still have women and girls diminished beyond what they could ever have hoped that they could be, simply because they don't have water, or they don't have sanitary towels, or they don't have fish. And in all of those aspects, what's happening now in a big way is that they're trading sex for that. Whereas you wouldn't have your male peers doing that. And, and a lot of the time, they're the ones waking up in the morning to go fetch water at 4 a.m. So you try to go in groups, but the cartels are also aware of it and protecting it. So it's really evil, it's evolving, and unfortunately, yes, you can do a lot of the amplification and advocacy that we want to do, but as long as perpetrators are quote unquote rewarded by still walking free, a lot of them go past their perpetrators every day. What are you telling them? You're telling them that gender-based violence is something you will live with. It's something that your mother lived with. And so therefore, who are you to try and change the pattern around? And so that's what it is. It's really any form that diminishes, abuses, violates, and continues to evolve in different aspects of life. And it shows women and girls, you cannot go beyond where you are just based on the fact that we'll continue to extort you in any way that we want to. And so that's a lot of the work we deal with, whether it's menstrual inequality, as I mentioned, because sex for pads is also something that we deal with in the community. And all of these forms of rape and violation based on the fact that you have to trade something to access a basic right.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I think like what really stands out is just like how one issue might lead to something else, and how things are just interconnected, like nothing really exists in a vacuum, and solving issues might mean solving something else first, and then it has knock-on effects. And so yeah, that's just really, really fascinating, so thank you for that. We're actually now going to go back to you, Janet, and I'll ask kind of one panelist a question each, and you can maybe have touched on some of this already in your previous answer, but I suppose, given your experience working with young girls specifically, what would you say are the most prominent forms of gender-based violence that they face in your experience? Maybe that is, sex for water, sex for pads, that kind of thing, or something else. And maybe, is there anything that you think is going on behind closed doors that you wish got more attention?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, definitely alluded to it, because that is what we hope can begin to get more attention, is the extortion at every single point in this girl's life. So yes, we deal a lot with adolescents. We're trying to create a holistic approach where we are educating the community. But the focus is this young girl who's vulnerable, who comes from a background of violence, which is really prevalent in many communities. And sometimes we can talk about communities and like informal settlements, but we're well aware that this transcends across the board. And so again, if she's not able to access something that she needs, she's having to give up herself. That's shooting up the cases of teen pregnancy. The gap of HIV infections for adolescent girls has widened. And so they're vulnerable and exposing themselves because they genuinely feel like they don't have a choice. And so that's something that we are trying to raise a little bit more awareness on. And beyond that, it's the access to justice link that's also really strong. So like you said, looking at these different assets and facets of life, you have this girl who wakes up at 4 to go fetch water. She's violated. She falls pregnant, right? So now she's a teen mom, and that's an extra burden. And then she's trying to get access to justice, which is a story that we know of a mother saying, this happened to my daughter. But the court systems are also, like I mentioned, the perpetrators are walking free. There's been a massive conversation with the justice system last year that I was a part of with the Chief Justice about the access link being broken. right? And so if you don't strengthen the psychosocial support, the access to basic needs, and the access to justice, then you're completely holding people hostage. And so a lot of the work we do, yes, the first off intervention is access. What is it that we're trying to get? It's what you mentioned, Lauren, like you're saying, you realize that there's so many things that need to be addressed before. Yes, why do we have cartels controlling access to water? How about we address that and make sure that access to water is widespread? And then beyond that, psychosocial support, which again, a lot of women, we have a center in Korogosho that we're going to start using to make a pad making machine to create economic empowerment. But before it even came, a lot of them came because they said they needed psychosocial support. And so realizing and validating that that's something that really needs a lot of, I guess, investments and a lot of attention. It may seem like you try to figure out how to measure it, but at the end of the day, it's validating their trauma and trying to move them past it. And then again, we had a legal aid clinic to try and understand how you can access justice, because some of them are living with their perpetrators. Some of them have perpetrators who are, you know, vying for political seats. So what does that really say? It says that we reward perpetrators, and your pain, your experience isn't valid. So we realized that trying to deal with the period poverty was bringing out all of these other intersectionalities that they were saying to us, without this, we cannot move this way. And so we're trying to create this kind of ecosystem of empowerment and access that allows them to thrive. You know, women don't want to survive. Women want to thrive, because when you're surviving, you're attached to your trauma, and it's exhausting, it's expensive, it's diminishing, it's a lot of gaslighting, it's very invalidating. The president has made commitments, great. Kenya is a poster child for fantastic policies, but we cannot say enough how much is happening out there behind closed doors that is kind of, again, diminishing the progress that's been made on policies. So in a nutshell, Lauren, that's what it is. We've seen Sex for Water, that we felt really needed to get more attention. And we're so happy it did. We got a report out, and one of the political officers wants to sit with the organizations and say, how can we do that? Good. That's what advocacy is about. But we're also getting burnt out trying to make people understand that unless you're validating the issue, not saying cliche things that we want to hear, but actually investing in it, in behavioral change patterns, in access to justice, then you're just going to keep going round and round, and we'll keep asking ourselves, you know, how do we get out of this? So that's kind of the different ways that I hope I've answered your question, is thinking through what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it and what we're hoping to achieve, which is just a lot more empathy and, you know, a lot more responsibility to saying we haven't done enough. We haven't listened enough. We haven't invested enough. We haven't punished enough, because we haven't. Because right now there's people living with their perpetrators even as we speak. So yeah, I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so much to respond to there. Like so good. I think like what is just standing out is just like the fact that there's so many issues to touch upon, but I think there is some commonalities, things like no accountability is one, you know, for so many things that are done to women. So yeah, that's just brilliant. Thank you so much for that. We'll move on to Nina next. So I'd say is, yeah, this is obviously links with the work you're doing. You know, I would love to maybe get an overview more in depth on the work you do for those who are in danger of child marriage and, you know, so-called honor killings. And I would love to maybe hear a bit more about why you think that it's still going on today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks, Janet. That was, I'm learning so much as well. But there are a lot of commonalities across the board. One of the things that Janet said was about self-worth that's what I heard, self-worth of the victims. But it's not just the victims, it's the victims' parents and often the mothers that pass that on because they feel that's acceptable. And last year or the year before, I started to hold people accountable myself because my long journey taught me not to have any self-worth. And that starts with self-love. But how do you love yourself if you're constantly told from a young child that you're worth nothing and that you are nothing and that you must keep your head down? So from my own experiences, what it's like for a girl in my culture and the African culture, many African cultures and the Middle Eastern culture, is that girls live in fear. And that 4-letter word is such a powerful word because it takes away any other emotion that they will ever feel in their lives. They will never feel love. They will never feel gratitude or being even seen. They are not seen. They are almost just tools that are used for a means. Honour killings are happening all around the world. When I did my TED talk, and please check it out, everyone who's watching, it's called There Is No Honour in Killing. And in my TED talk, I was asked continuously afterwards when people did watch it, even though I say I'm born and raised in the United Kingdom, I was asked continuously, did this happen in India? And no is the answer, because not every African is living in Africa, not every Indian is living in India, and not every person from the Middle East or anybody that has this cultural understanding that it's the right thing to do is no longer living, because we are an interracial, multicultural society now. So unfortunately, people are still taking these old traditions and these old values with them and not allowing girls to show how amazing they too can be. So they are they're not allowed to flourish. They are held down. They, you know, my culture doesn't allow you to even look up. So it took me a long time to actually look somebody in the face and talk to them, because I was constantly scurrying around, and that's what's happening now. What I want to do and what I can do are two totally different things. I'd love to change the world and literally go around sprinkling love dust over everyone just so they feel loved and valued, because that's how I am now. I'm full of love. But I understand that's not a reality, and it's frustrating because I want to do so much. But one little change at a time is where I'm at. I have helped women leave relationships that they've entered in when they were children at the age of 10, and I've moved them from one area to a different area. I had a call from a girl from Afghanistan on LinkedIn, and I don't know how she got onto LinkedIn to even leave a voice message, but the point is she was asking for help. Now, it was on Boxing Day, I didn't pick it up, and I know that she would have been forced into a marriage, and she was, like I said, she was 10 years old. So I'm trying to now establish links all around the world where I can send somebody. So if you come to me from Zimbabwe, I can send you to somebody for help. If you come to me from a different place, I can send you there. And that's what I'm establishing. But really, girls are wanting help. Every girl out there, you know, I thought I was Rapunzel at one point when I was growing up, reading my fairy tales, thinking I just would be saved one day. But I think there's a lot of girls out there that feel that maybe there's somebody out there that will come and help them. And we will shine that light between us to say that, look, we're fighting for you. Maybe it's a personal thing for you as well, I don't know. But for me, it's a very personal thing that I couldn't help my 6-year-old self, but now I can help another 6-year-old self, or a 14-year-old woman, or rather a young girl or a woman. I am educating people in the sense of if they are, as I said, being trafficked or forced out of this country to a different country, what they can do to stop themselves. You know, I'm using the universal sign that they are trapped, because a lot of airport security recognize that sign. But I'm also saying to them, place a metal object into your underwear, which will set off the security devices at the airports. And I am looking at going into airports to discuss what to look out for. Because I'll be honest, if they had taken me to the airport to take me to India, I wouldn't have fought because I was too scared. And this is what I'm trying to get across, that yes, you are scared, but there is a whole new life out there. And freedom is such a luxury that many people don't have or value. But when you do have it, it's something you are so grateful for. And I'm grateful for every day that I wake up, because simple things like being able to choose whether I want a cup of tea or a coffee are things I couldn't do as a child or even as a woman, because I have unfortunately suffered from domestic violence too. So these are the small things, but the small things add up to bigger things. I don't have a lot of faith in government constitutions, because at the end of the day, a lot of these places are known to them, especially the trafficking places, especially where my sister's been left. But because they regard it as a religious institute, it's untouchable, and the police from the United Kingdom couldn't gain access. So an individual like myself would never be able to go there. And it's only through some agencies that save girls from trafficking that I found out that that particular institute holds children where they allow them to grow to a certain age. And then it's a place for organ harvesting organs. So it's heartbreaking, it really, really is. But it's a case of stopping that child getting to where they're being taken to start with, because I don't know my sister, I'll be honest, because she was born out of wedlock from my father. But I can understand that a 6-year-old would be so scared to be abducted and taken in such this way, So if we can start talking to parents and educating the newer generation and saying to them, look, this is what the situation is, treat your daughter in a different way, and also teaching them in schools about things like, you know, like you were explaining about the breast ironing, trying to give them a little bit of self-worth, because the moment that we all stand together and say no, we become a united front. It's just that we're so scared to speak out, and that's where I'm really coming from. So it's that internal personal power that can overcome everything else, slowly but surely, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I think I like the just the importance of highlighting just the fear there, because I think a lot of times we put it on women and girls to, you know, fight for their own battles, and it's like we don't take into account the real serious fear that's there. And I love what you said at the beginning about how, you know, it's often passed down from mothers to their daughters, and I think yeah, it's just it's sad, you know, that even like victims themselves will still kind of pass on that standard because it's what they know, and again, fear probably from them too. So thank you so much for giving us that. I will turn to Yvonne next. Basically, you know, I think you have obviously, you know, like such experience with this, I guess, maybe little known cultural practice of breast ironing. I would love just maybe just go in more in depth about it than you have already, you know, where and why it's performed. And I guess it's a little maybe more about the work you're doing to combat it.
Thank you so much. So breast ironing, like I said, it's an attempt to halt the development of prepubescent breast. So you have a 9-year-old whose breasts are beginning to sprout, and the mother would target the hard substance inside the breast that starts with the development of the breast with any object: hot stone, a spatula, a mortar pestle, leaves, banana peelings. Here in the Western world, you have breast bands. So I would like for us not to start thinking about breast ironing as a barbaric practice that happens in Africa. It happens all over the world. And it's very in Cameroon, and the reason is the high of early marriages. More and more women are beginning to understand the need to keep their children in school. So this practice is in a bid to stop marital sex, early marriage, and teenage pregnancy, because when girls get pregnant, then they drop out of school and the investment in them is wasted. So mothers, in an attempt to be modern and their children in school, this practice in secret. Violence is the inflictor's shield so far as breast ironing and most gender-based violence is concerned. It's a top secret between girls, their mothers, and other female family members who perpetrate this act on them. The girl will usually be taken away during the dusk or the dawn in some hidden part of the house, maybe the kitchen behind closed doors. And this very painful act of pressing, pounding, and massaging the breast is carried out. And like I said, GTZ conducted research in faraway 2008 that says 1 in 4 is a victim of breast ironing in Cameroon. Health experts say it has tremendous effects on the health of the breast. Cysts, maladies, overenlargement of breast tissues, cancer have been named. And also, like an aid for women who want to pound on the effect it has on the self-esteem of the girls. What value do you have of yourself if you're told that your breast, which is supposed to be normal, every human being has a natural tendency of growing and developing, but unfortunately women and girls are being shamed because of their sexuality. And so that's the message that is being given to these young girls when their breasts are being suppressed. Suppressing not only the breast, suppressing the girl, suppressing who she is as a person. Because just from what happened to my cousin affected the rest of my life till I happened. That silence is not allowed, especially when it comes to gender-based violence. The first thing is that when your body is devalued, you are shy. Like Nina said, you don't accept your own because you feel like you're a problem to society if you're sexually attractive. And then you start trying to suppress your sexuality, suppress your voice, suppress your potential. And then we ask ourselves why there's no gender equality in society. How would the girl child compare herself to her male classmates? the male child gets back home from school and he focuses on doing his homework. The girl child has to go fetch water, come help mom in the kitchen, and when it's dark, her breasts are being ironed. I always say this to people who are talking about why we're not achieving gender equality. I say, think of a girl child whose vagina was mutilated at the age of 6, whose breast was ironed at the age of 9, who got married at the age of 15, and who had her first child at 16, became a victim of fistula. And then by the time she's 20 years old, her husband dies and she's subjected to widowhood rituals. That's a possibility. How do you expect that kind of person to fully contribute to the growth of society? How do you expect that kind of person to fully develop their potentials? How do you expect that kind of person to love themselves, talk less of loving the community? How do you expect that kind of person to even think they're equal to the other sex? Those are the conversations we should start having, and that's what we do in Cameroon. Women Services, formerly known as Gender Danger, we go around breaking the silence about breast ironing in churches, cultural groups, wherever women, we break the silence about breast ironing. Prior to the share the story about breast ironing, very few international media had covered it because it is a top secret news and more. They don't talk about it out of that room. So I broke the silence online on a platform called Wellpulse, where I am a board member now, which encourages women from all over the world to speak out, to use their voices to liberate themselves, to come in, and I'm encouraging us to encourage the use of digital spaces to break silence about gender-based violence, because when an violence is named and shamed, the perpetrators become afraid. When it is shielded in all this belief of, oh, it's tradition and so on, the perpetrators have the courage to continue. So in Cameroon, our efforts have been able to reach over 40,000 women who have disavowed breast ironing, and we succeeded to make the government of Cameroon pass a law to stop the practice of breast ironing. Even though we always say that laws are not enough and all of that, but at least it should be recorded somewhere that a crime is being committed somewhere and that crime has repercussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I think I particularly just love, that the silence is what allows these things to breed and grow a lot of the time. So I particularly love that. And yeah, I love how the kind of life cycle you went through, but someone experiences FGM and then experiences breast ironing and then early marriage, and just how that that trajectory can kind of set off on your life. So yeah, thank you for kind of walking us through that. I will now turn to Doreen. Again, another really, really interesting topic that just really isn't, I suppose, talked about enough, sexual violence in prisons and other detention settings. But yeah, we'd just love to hear more in depth. Why do you think it gets ignored? And again, maybe more in depth on what actually happens. And I guess, what are you and Just Detention International doing to combat it?
Thanks, Lauren. I mean, I suppose the very simple and short answer of it is that the reality is that people deprived of their liberty, particularly incarcerated persons, generally do not elicit much sympathy and empathy from society. And in South Africa, this is especially because of the high levels of crime and violence in the country. So society is either indifferent to sexual abuse behind bars, or they joke about it. And in some instances, people even endorse it, believing it to be an appropriate punishment for an offense. And also the thing is that, the general public also incorrectly believes that all the horrendous and inhumane things that happen to incarcerated people behind bars does not concern broader society. And so, incarcerated persons then often tend to be excluded from most human rights related organizing, and especially, organizing against gender-based violence, which is truly unfortunate, as prisons are notorious for being incubators of all forms and manifestations of violence. They, including misogyny, where it's not only reproduced and replicated, but it is also reinforced and preserved. So, I mean, we need to remember that prisons are transitory communities. And so whether a person is incarcerated or is working there, and whether they are victims of sexual abuse or perpetrators of sexual abuse behind bars, or even just people who observe it, what is then basically being reinforced every day is the idea that, femininity or, any other forms of masculinity that do not align with toxic hypermasculinities are basically available for violation. And this is something that affects everybody in society, not just the people who are incarcerated when they're incarcerated. Another reason is that also the majority of the people who are incarcerated in the world's prisons are men. and most people don't think of men as being vulnerable or being negatively impacted by patriarchy and misogyny and other oppressive systems. So people and even activists often forget that, other, that if other, more widely accepted, vulnerable groups such as women and LGBTIQ plus people, and in some countries even children, are also, detained in these facilities. So even if we do not think about men who are behind bars, there are also women behind bars. There are also LGBTIQ people behind bars. There are also children behind bars whose vulnerability to gender-based violence that actually does take place in prisons, is amplified precisely because of the nature of their environment. That with the absence of their liberty, or their liberty being taken away, that vulnerability is amplified and it's increased. And I think it was Janet who was saying that, where survivors or victims wind up living with their perpetrators. This is literally, the situation for people who are in places of detention and prisons and other closed settings. And then also when we're thinking about men, I mean, the other reality is that, Black and brown men are the most overrepresented population in prisons in a lot of countries in the world, including South Africa, the United Kingdom, and the United States. And then when this is taken into account, alongside the anti-Black history of the mainstream anti-rape movement and the criminal legal systems of these countries, particularly in the United States, we have to also acknowledge that racism also plays a role in the exclusion of incarcerated persons, and more specifically survivors of prisoner rape, from anti-GBV strategies and projects. So, racist and classist logics are also at the root of the refusal to recognize incarcerated male, particularly Black male vulnerability and experience of sexual violence as a form of gender-based violence, and something that also needs to be addressed in order to advance all, activism against gender-based violence. And also the other thing is that women are also currently, the incarceration of women globally is also currently increasing at a much higher rate than men. So again, women are also continue to be made more vulnerable to sexual abuse behind bars. And again, in most of our activism, women who are incarcerated or in other, detention facilities often get left out in the broader planning. And therefore, it means that, there are other pockets of society that are not being impacted by the work and the strategies that are being put in place. Homophobia, and transphobia in broader society also play a huge role in making this an invisible issue, because again, it being same-sex and same-gender facilities, in some instances, and in some countries where homosexuality is criminalized, it becomes swept under the rug, and then makes it more prevalent and more easier for it to be perpetuated. So all of these blind spots that I'm highlighting in anti-GBV activism have resulted in planning that does not include survivors of prisoner rape, whether they're women or whether they're men, but whether they're women or LGBTIQ plus persons, but especially also if they're men. So the services for support and prevention strategies also do not include this demographic, and this needs to happen. And then as JDI, what we do, JDI is towards prisoners, as well as the hypermasculine culture that pervades prisons, which fuel the spread of HIV and gender-based violence. We also work with survivors of sexual abuse in detention to share their stories, and we ensure that all our programs are informed by their experiences and wisdom. We provide technical assistance to national government entities and local detention facilities, including oversight bodies, and enhance communication between them to promote people in detention's health, safety, and human rights. And lastly, we mobilize and train counselors, human healthcare providers, and spiritual care workers to increase quality of services for survivors of sexual abuse and detention. Because our core principle as an organization is that no matter what crime someone may have committed, rape should never be a part of the penalty. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, yeah, so much to pick up on there. Yeah, particularly love the emphasis on just the intersectional nature of this, and just how there are so many layers and there's so many repercussions of sexual violence in detention centers. And I think, again, just really, really interesting just how society just views it as a non-issue just because of the setting that it takes place in. And I think that is just fascinating. And again, you use the word, you know, a transitory setting, like people, that's not where it ends. It has an effect back out on society. So I think, so yeah, just thank you for flagging that. Okay, so thank you all for kind of giving more in-depth on what you do. I'd love to now ask you kind of one last question to you all. Basically, you know, why do you think gender-based violence is so prevalent globally? And, you know, what do you think are the main reasons holding back progress? So again, I'll just call on each one of you and just thank you for anything you can give us. So Yvonne?
Thank you again. I think the reason for which gender-based violence is so prevalent is, first of all, there is this denial in all of us. I'm not responsible for this. They are doing that, especially when it comes to a practice like breast ironing. Again, it's looked up as some horrendous barbaric practice that is happening in faraway Africa. And so since I started my campaigning against breast ironing, I have seen so much interest in news organizations writing about breast ironing. What is important is not just the story, so that people know about this new thing that is happening that they didn't know about and end it there. We need to have people to take commitment. We need institutions to take commitment to investing in stopping this global problem. There is no form of gender-based violence, again, I say, that is unique to any part of the world because of migration and also with the coming of the age of the internet, where the world is becoming a global village more and more. If I am somebody that propagates a practice like breast, I could run a show online and propagate this idea, and every person would think like me that their daughter not be victims to rape and who have the same this. So I want to diagnose something. It's a deep-rooted cultural acceptance of devaluing the bodies of women all over the world. It manifests in different ways in communities. And so on that platform of agreement, I want to say that people advocate for a way of devaluing their women and spread it and get more followers. So we have to really own and man this fight against violence as a whole, and not think that if it is happening mostly in Cameroon, it's not my problem. It should be the problem of everybody. We should own it and fight it and invest in it. And I really thank God for this forum that has recognized some forms of gender-based violence as either ignored or not taken as important or not considered was spreading like the others. And it is important for us to stamp our feet against all forms of gender-based violence, all of them, because if we are looking to achieve gender equality, then we cannot allow a huge chunk of our population to be grossly violated and denied the opportunity to develop themselves and harness their potentials for the vision of development as we want to. So again, summarily, why is it that we're not making consistent progress? It is because we're not naming the problem, owning the problem. We're trying to name it and shame it on others. Let's all say, hey, we are guilty of this. Hey, how can we stop it together? And I would begin by doing to my daughter what I would want every other woman to do to their daughter, and to do to every other person's daughter what I would want them to do to mine. It should be an exchange of responsibility. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I love that. I think it just kind of, yeah, gives in a weird way, a positive note to it if we just own it and just, yeah, just the word you used was denial. And I think it's just the perfect word to talk about this. And even as you were speaking, you know, for your particular example, breast ironing, it's not just happening in Cameroon. And I think of that quote, you know, by Audre Lorde, it's like, I am not free until, you know, something like every other woman is free, even if her shackles are very different from my own. And I think that's just kind of the perfect synopsis for kind of what you were saying. So thank you for that. We'll go to Doreen next.
Okay. So, I mean, I think there are a plethora of challenges to achieving the eradication of GBV globally. And I mean, but one of which is that we continue to exclude certain groups. I mean, that's the whole, and which is one of the amazing things about today's, this webinar that you've introduced, that, there's a lot of subordination that happens to different kinds of gender-based violence or particular issues. There's also kind of a hierarchy to issues. And I think, that is then contributes to the delay in progress, or the slowing down of progress. So we continue to exclude certain groups from our understanding and conceptualization of how to tackle the problem. And as long as we don't dedicate equal effort and capacity to addressing it in all pockets of society where it may exist, regardless of the actions and the sex and the gender of the perpetrator or victim, it will persist. That is the reality. It will continue to reproduce itself and preserve itself, so that's the other thing, that we need to tackle it in all aspects in which it exists. And sexual abuse in prisons and other closed settings, like I mentioned earlier, and Lauren, you're interested to find out a bit more about that, is that it is a gendered violence. I mean, it's sexual violence, so already that presupposes a level of gendering. And then for so we need to start looking at how these things then basically reinforce the same things that we're trying to dismantle, and not acknowledging these dynamics may therefore limit the effectiveness of interventions which are attempting to prevent gender-based violence. Another reason for this is the deep investment in what bell hooks termed white supremacist capitalist patriarchy by those who benefit from it the most. So it's important to look at the violence that affects various groups of people holistically. I mean, it's good to have very directed focus on the different nuanced, the specific forms of violence, but how they feed into each other and reproduce each other in the different ways that they do. And one way of addressing this is, through a total application of intersectionality into anti-GBV work. So, which is our advocacy, our data collection, our strategizing and resource mobilization. This total application of intersectionality would require an interrogation of all these other, big oppressive systems that reinforce this particular issue that we're thinking about, and also looking at the histories of imperialism and colonialism that also kind of then feed into some of these things, and particularly our criminal legal systems. And I'm making reference to these precisely because we are working with people who are deprived of their liberty and who are incarcerated, but also precisely because gender-based activism, gender-based violence activism is basically reliant on, carcerality as a response or a way of addressing gender-based violence in our society. So we need to understand the structures and the natures and the hegemonies that basically control these spaces and hinder any potential progress in fighting gender-based violence. So yeah, including sexual violence in prisons and other closed settings in our plans and strategies as activists, governments and service providers and donors will bring us one step closer to truly transforming society. It is about basically making a holistic approach at looking at fighting this pandemic, essentially. The failure to eradicate it thus far basically calls for an urgent need for us to basically find new ways of thinking about it, understanding it, and basically trying to dismantle it. Thanks.
Absolutely, thank you so much. And I love just all the different kind of issues you've mentioned and how they just, the words you use, reinforce, reproduce each other. I think it's just so important to just acknowledge that. Again, as I said earlier on, nothing exists in a vacuum. And again, you mentioned just a hierarchy of issues. And I think that speaks to we're here today talking about issues that are not really given that much attention. And I think it's so true that there is a hierarchy, what's more important, what's less important. So thank you again for highlighting that. Janet, we'll go to you next.
I mean, it's the gaslighting and invalidation of people's experiences and lived truth that, many feel then it's not taken as seriously or mainstreamed. And so until we're able to validate and understand it, it always seems small when you say it until you go through it, or a version of it, that when you're made to believe that your experience doesn't matter, that's your lived truth, but you're being told it's in your head, or you're being told you'll get over it because those before you did. There has to be a complete kind of behavioral, intentional view and lens in understanding that these issues around GBV affect so many facets of life. Doreen used the word, it's very intersectional, first of all. And I think what can be done there's various things. I know that we started our organization through a story. I'm a storyteller, I'm an amplifier. And because of a story about a girl in Marigat in Baringo County who was using chicken feathers and goat hide to manage period, I was a news anchor at the time, and it was the first time I think something like that was talked about in primetime news. Country was up in arms, pushing for a bigger budgetary allocation from Parliament. Guess what? It worked. The pressure, the cave. In 2015, they started working on a menstrual health policy. It was published in 2020 because of a story. So let's completely understand that. Let's mainstream these issues. Let's amplify them. Let's tell these stories. Let's give these stories a face and a name. Even as we protect survivors, let's make sure that their voices are fully heard, because that then begins the chain of change. And that's what I've seen in my line of work. I did a story called My First Time, a book called My First Time, that was talking to different people about their first interaction with the period, but it was speaking to broader social justice issues as well. A woman who was formerly incarcerated talked about her story. You know, a former street girl, and all of them talked about their experiences and how it then informed different ways that they were treated, or different ways that it informed the decisions they made as women. So let's tell those stories. Let's partner. Partnerships is a big win. That's what I guess worked for Generation Equality Forum last year. And let's be loud. This is one of the webinars I've enjoyed so much. I think just because of the very varied issues that have come out, and seeing all these incredible allies, you're kind of like digging deep into trying to shed light on, as you said, Lauren. So sorry, I have toddlers screaming downstairs, but it's okay, I'm gonna keep going. And so let's shed light, let's partner, let's amplify. When you scream loud enough, you silence the bullies. These all sound like simple things to say, but we've seen them work. We've seen the, speaking out, using stories, pushing for policy through that, and just not letting up. For now, I think I always feel strongly for people who may be triggered, who are listening to so many stories of GBV. We hear you, we validate you, and it's important that we're all able to kind of stretch our arms out and understand that, healing takes time. It's interesting how survivors are forced to heal overnight. An athlete with a broken limb can't run. So let's kind of really dig deep into the psychosocial support that I keep mentioning, because we know that this person needs to go back to feeling, as Nina said, that they have this worth. Without that, it actually costs the economy when you have people who are less productive. This shouldn't even be about the bottom line, but guess what? It's about every single aspect of life. So let's partner, let's amplify, let's push, let's not relent, and let's continue to challenge all of these stereotypes that are completely holding back progress and diminishing the lives of men, women, girls, boys, and other genders that just do not feel seen or heard. Webinars like this need to exist a lot more, and then they need to be followed through with pushing for policy to be implemented, and that cycle needs to continue. I'll try and put inuadadafoundation.org for people who want to read a little bit about the work we're doing to try and get money in the hands of women and their families, and pads in the hands of girls. So thank you. This has been just absolutely incredibly insightful. Just looking forward to seeing how everybody here is going to change the lives of so many people. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet. Yeah, and again, so much to respond to. I think, we mentioned just stories, and again, it's these things that we think are simple, but I think so much change in the world has just started with a story. And I think, you mentioned gaslighting as well. I think a lot of times we are gaslit, and then we also ourselves don't think that we have a story to tell. We don't think there's an issue. So I think a lot of that work needs to be done so that we even ourselves acknowledge that there's an issue, and then in order to tell that story. So thank you so much for drawing attention to that. And then Nina, we'll finish up with you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, amazing shares. I've been sat here sort of nodding away. But I think Yvonne actually said earlier on about accountability, and I've mentioned it as well, that last year I started holding people in my personal life accountable for things, because we become people pleasers. When you've been through any sort of trauma, you become a people pleaser. But I think the thing that we can do now is to show up, stand up and speak up, because our stories are very uncomfortable for people to listen to. And often people, especially on LinkedIn, will say to me, it's a little too much sometimes, but I used to apologize and I used to come with a trigger warning, but I've refused to. I refuse to come with a trigger warning, because this is the reality. This is the rawness. This is the reality. So why are we going to flower it up? Why would we? It's not how the victim is feeling at that time or what they're going through. So I refuse to do that. Unfortunately, we are embedded with this shameful, stigmatized mentality that it's our fault. And I would like, as Yvonne has also mentioned, to speak about child rape, because I was raped as a child by the hands of my father and his friends. But I want to speak about all of those really horrible things so that I understand it's not me. It's not me. It's them. It's the perpetrators that should feel shameful. They should feel stigmatized. They should feel like they are the ones that are the wrong ones in society, not us. And I think the more people that stand up and do it, which is a difficult thing to do, but the more people that do stand up and do it, the power is taken away from the perpetrators, because suddenly it's, I can't do this because somebody's going to call me out on it. And I did carry a lot of guilt because I never held my father accountable for the attempted honor killing. And then 20 years later, he abducted my sister. Now, you know, I understand it's not necessarily my fault. I was very fearful and there are no excuses, but I can do something now. And I'll tell you, in my LinkedIn, I get constant messages about being beheaded, that, you know, the work that you're doing, you should silence yourself because you shouldn't be talking about such things. These are internal things. We don't talk about them outside of our culture. So I'm told the only thing that really I should be given is the honor of being beheaded. And this is a thing with honor killings and a lot of our cultural crimes. Somebody beheading you, for them, is the utmost respect that they could gain by doing that injustice to another person. It's murder. There's no other word for it. All of these traumatic experiences that young girls are encountering, whether it's in wherever we are in the world, is an injustice that somebody somewhere has to start standing up and saying, this is wrong. And I say to people that if you see a crime that's being committed, don't think somebody else is going to talk about it for you and do something. Make a discreet call. You don't have to be immediately confronting that person. You do it very discreetly, but do something, because if you're not doing something, you are part of the problem. So be part of the solution, don't be part of the problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love that. Yeah, and I think like that lesson can be, you know, put across so many issues, whether it's, you know, the huge things or even just really, really, you know, small things that happen in your everyday. I think, you know, something we can all do something. And again, it's not a matter of, you know, going in there and, you know, being the hero. It can be more, you know, behind the scenes, you know, making sure everyone's safe. And yeah, there's again so much to respond to there, but thank you so much. So everybody, we have come to the end of the talk. It is just gone the hour. Thank you all so much for coming. I think I personally have learned so much, and I think this is a really good discussion, and just unfortunately the myriad ways that gender-based violence shows up in our society, different but yet still all connected, and again reinforced by each other. And I think just, you know, prevention was mentioned a lot. I think, you know, just getting to the root cause and stopping it before it, you know, takes on a life of its own and becomes, you know, a life just kind of, I guess, succumbed to violence. So yeah, thank you all so much for attending. Thank you to our wonderful speakers. I'll just say a few, you know, short things before we head off. So we have a feedback form, Women in Dev feedback form. My colleague is going to put it in the chat right now. If anybody had the, you know, a few minutes to fill it out on what you liked, didn't like about the webinar, we would love that so we can improve future ones, or, you know, what have you. I would also, yeah, I think the panelists have put some of their links in the chat, so please do check those out. And if you haven't, please feel free to put in any links right now. Please also do follow Women in Dev on our social media channels, and also this webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you want to watch it again or want to share with you know, a colleague or a friend in your space to watch, then that would be absolutely amazing. We also do have a newsletter that you can subscribe to on our website, and we have a podcast. So lots going on, and yeah, I think we just want to be a small part of the work to make the world a better place. So thank you all so much for attending, and hopefully see you at a next event or something else. And yeah, thank you, and have a nice rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.